All right. Hello, and welcome to everyone that is tuning in. Perhaps some of you live, some of you listening over the podcast as it will be sent out through Dollars and Dragons. It'll be all over the interwebs. And here we are now to answer your many, many questions about the Vineyard RPG. If you do have questions while we are chatting and something comes up, the benefit of being live here, and we'll do another one of these at some point before the Kickstarter launch and, throughout our development of the book, is that you can put your little questions or your big questions into the thread in hashtag the dash vineyard. And you go to the AMA thread and you will be able to ask those burning questions. Dot, I'm going to turn it over to you. I have not given you a lot of prep work, but I know that you can do it.
Okay, well, it seems super relevant for us to introduce who's actually joining us from the team for the chat today. So instead of me starting, I'm going to actually just pass it down the line to VJ, and then VJ, you can pass it to Nat.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. My name is VJ Harris. My pronouns are they, them, and he, him. And I am a freelance TTRPG designer and pro GM, and I'm one of the writers and designers for the Vineyard. Mostly stat blocks and a little bit of adventure design here and there. Nat.
Hi, I'm Nat, also freelance designer. All pronouns are they and he. And I've been designated the lead mechanical designer on Vineyard. I'm really excited to help steward the conversion of this thing as we've rocketed through into the Black Flag project. I'm really excited for that.
Nice. I'm Dot, everybody. I by day am the marketing director for Kobold Press, and by night I do a lot of different freelance work for the tabletop community at large, including writing for this project. I was just announced as world designer for the new Fallout RPG book from Modiphius, so world design has a very great deep place in my heart, and I'm excited that Friday let me bring some of those ideas to this project. And Friday, just in case I don't know who you are.
I mean, Linda Codega knows who I am now, so I'm fucking famous, you know what I mean?
Well, then you don't have to introduce yourself. I guess I'll just pass right on by.
No, that's fine. So I'm Friday. You can find me as Friday TV on Twitter. That's where most people follow me. I also have the newsletter and the podcast you're listening to currently. So if you'd like to get these sort of things to your inbox, then you can hit the subscribe on the Dollars and Dragons newsletter. I put out both blog posts for professional GMs, helping everyday people make a little bit more money so that they can, survive capitalism by doing something that they love. And that's one of my primary missions with my platform, is to do that. But I'm also the director of this book, and I have written quite a bit of it. It first came to be as a homebrew campaign that I developed for my players for a stream, 2 years ago now. I started this project about a year ago. And some of these lovely individuals who are joining me today are those people who agreed to, write a little bit of gothic horror with me. And I'm so excited to, first of all, be this far into the stage of production. And I'm incredibly humbled by the immensely powerful team that has assembled under the banner.
Yes, the flag is waving very high today for Black Flag. And I will say, if you're in chat listening live and have questions about Project Black Flag and its a kind of implementation into this project, I will answer what I can answer from a Kobold Press side of things, and then I'll drop my Vineyard, drop that hat and put on my Vineyard hat of when questions are relevant there. So we will do our best, but just know the rumors are true.
Yes, Dot not only is the marketing director for Kobold Press, but is one of our writers and someone who has written entire areas that I have entrusted to Dot because I know how fucking weird and fucked up that Dot can write like weird stuff. So
look, y'all, I had to ask, like when I submitted to Bethesda, even I was like, is this gonna be too much? Like for a Fallout setting? And they were like, maybe. So yeah, it gets a little my worlds get a little scary, but that's one of the things I loved when you pitched the project, Friday, is that it is an unforgiving place.
Okay. And we'll start with like some of the questions that you have assembled.
Yeah, so it seems
kind of go from there.
Just looking through, so we had some questions posted, it looks like, over the last few days. We'll start there, and then we can always take live questions. But a lot of these questions are really about influence, inspiration, right? We have things around like what kind of literary elements, right, are influential in this. We've got what kind of songs would you put on a playlist? It seems that people are really interested in what has inspired this to come around.
Yeah, so I guess that's a question for me then. So I would say that for me, I have always been very interested in mobster movies. And I've also been interested in a lot of the lore and the sort of interesting horror media. And I have always been looking for a way to combine those two things. So the Vineyard initially was just one of the organizations that I developed when I was developing a homebrew setting. And it ended up sort of being the most interesting thing that the players were interacting with. That and the cult of Chiagaidat, who is the dragon alternate component of that sort of dynamic. But the which is the next book, which I have not yet announced or begun to build. But
there's a next book Friday. News to me.
yeah, of course there is. Like, come on.
Yeah, look
now.
to the
Like,
future.
This is. But anyway, yeah. So initially, it was for me. It was something in between like corporate capitalism and mobster movies, and then also I wanted some gothic horror in there as well because near and dear to my heart. And if you're in the Discord and you see me in my profile picture, which is my vampire player character that I played for Kobo Press's stream, Empire of the Ghouls, I'm super into it. Like, I'm a queer, so like it's a big part of like my inspiration is sort of queer inspired horror. For me, those are the major elements. And then a lot of it also came from my initial players, from the development of the Vineyard and a lot of the inspirations initially before I took all those inspirations and I gave it to the writers at large. A lot of it came from them as well. And I just knowing what they would like to play and sort of developing around them so that they could have the most fun possible. When we had that, like, I think it was about 18 sessions, we had a campaign that I ran that show for.
Right.
Yeah.
Now,
I think
you say that you passed off things because that's what happens, right? Your project grows and you have to bring on a team of people.
Yeah.
What does that process look like to take like an idea and then pass it off and to the right people, hopefully, to kind of put their inspiration in?
Well, initially it started because I once had a dream of developing this story into something a bit more, this whole setting. And I ended up looking at who are the writers that I really admire their work on. And I was looking through Wizards books and I had opened up Icewind Dale, Realm of the Frostmaiden, and I was like looking at people's names on the writing list. And I just started Googling them. And I, ended up finding people like Ashley Warren and like Michaela Ebel, who goes by M now. And I just looked at their website and saw that they offered consulting. And I was like, I should email this person and ask them some questions about how to improve both my show and my narration, my narrative design for this adventure. And I ended up connecting with M by hiring them as a contractor to come in and just give me critique on like what I was doing with my story for the stream and looking at future planning with them. And after that, I was sort of in contact with M throughout that year. It was 2021 at the time. And then we ended up working together on One Night Straw briefly. And then I pitched to them like, hey, I can't think of someone better suited to work on this project than you, M, because when we worked together for the consulting and like they were helping me with sort of designing my adventure, M is so smart. M is so smart and capable, and I have always been incredibly impressed with M as a professional as well. Despite them being so young, it's just amazing what M is able to accomplish. They're so immensely not only like talented, but skilled and professional. And I knew that when I asked M questions, they were coming back to me with something that they had actively thought through in a very conscious way, and then also from a place of inspiration. And M was my first person that I worked with that I knew that if I can get M on the team, if I can convince them that this is a good idea, then I can bring in more very talented people to work with me on this idea. So it really started with me just trying to convince like the first co-creator,
right.
And that was M. Yeah.
Now, speaking of some of those talented folks you brought on, VJ and Nat, the same question, like, with the pieces and parts you've been handed and what you're specifically working on, what kind of inspiration are you drawing from to add to the Vineyard project?
You want to take this first, VJ?
Yeah, I'll take it. I have nothing against mob movies or anything. They've just never been my cup of tea, but I have like started watching them a little bit more just to get the vibe.
Yeah.
And, like, the stat blocks and stuff. I'm a big video game person. Like I'll devour just about any type of video game. And one of the things that I definitely think has been like in my mind as we're like building out these different these different stat blocks, the gothic horror element of it is really trying to embody like the kind of vibe you get from the game Vampire with a Y at the end. So it's got a lot of like vampires, obviously, and like other non-vampiric monsters as well, and have definitely like at the very least use the vibes to direct how I make things. Like I've got the whole vampire playlist going whenever I'm like working on design by myself. But yeah, definitely a lot of, and okay, there are other like vampire medias that I like Blade and Dracula 3000, those kinds of things. Consuming a lot of that to just make sure my head's in the right place.
Nice.
When I got brought on, one of the first things we talked about was an adventure. We were working for it. And we were talking about the different types of horror we wanted to express with the different portions of Vineyard. So what I latched onto was this kind of more cosmic survivalist horror connected to the gut in this rotting, destructive, creeping aspect to it. And one of the first things I did, because I'm like all vibes when it comes to like a generation, is I put down this I just did a big brainstorm of myself and come up with all these wild, wacky, weird creatures that are like, you know, like what if the guts got a parasite and then it spread to you? What do you become? Like, that's the kind of question I like to ask. What are these horrific movements that can create a story of anguish within a creature? Because that's what I brought on for at first, was creature design. But then it's also all vibes. Like within that same brainstorming document, I wrote Azure something. It's a word that belongs in this here somewhere. Like, I don't know what that nothing has been made of that yet, but I'll get there. And generally speaking, I am just an absolute junkie for cosmic horror stuff. I like things to get big and voidy and have a depth of darkness that is unfathomable. And I have a lot of experience applying that in a realistic way to TTRPGs, because I think we all know that if you just say that something is unimaginably terrifying, it just does nothing for your players. You have to ground it somehow, right?
I love that. And honestly, when Friday brought me on, I was also drawn to the void. I have this love of the thing this cosmic idea of the things we can't possibly understand. And put like word and meaning to, and I was drawn to that as well. And so when I started designing two very specific things, which is mechanics piece that's coming into the game, which we can talk about actually, that is based on the rot, this ever-changing kind of corruption, if you would. And so I wanted to look at, and that came from a few games that I had been playing and a few influences. And I when I started down that road, it can be tricky, right? To put in a mechanic for your players to take on some kind of corruption. And so I wanted to look at how other games were doing it. And so I can actually say I pulled a lot of inspiration from Coriolis, which comes from Free League, of course. A game called Good Strong Hands, which is heavily based kind of on the concept of like Dark Crystal or these 80s spaces. And then, of course, Fate of Cthulhu, which is a fate-based Cthulhu game, which has its own kind of build for corruption. And I started looking at these and digging around like what I liked and what does it actually mean to be here? Because if you are in the rot, you are either part of it or you are the problem. You are the virus in the rot. And it's trying so hard to make you a part of what it is. And I really wanted that to have a mechanic in a way that was optional for a table to take on or to completely leave behind and still get the same experience, right? One way or the other. We did come up with some really fun things, I think, there that I look forward to seeing what you all think about it. But honestly, the other part of why I came on was because I, too, have big feels around big business and consumerism. And the other piece I'm writing is a location, actually, in the Vineyard, connected, that is a dark market, a literal dark market. And one of the things I'm really enjoying about it is the fact that you're not going to be able to trade what you normally would here, right? Your gold means nothing. It is not valuable. So what do you trade to get what you need? And sometimes the things that you may need have to come from this place or be traded from this place. And so both the lieutenant I'm creating is tied to the dark market, and the dark market itself is tied to the larger corruption system that I've been working on that we're calling waste sickness. It's a mouthful. So we're calling waste sickness tied to the rot. That's kind of where I came from, and I love every genre of horror, but I particularly like sci-fi horror, and so I was really looking forward to how can I take that cosmic aspect that I love of horror and bring it into kind of this dark fantasy, this gothic horror as we have already defined. So that's kind of where my head was at when I came into this project. Now that being said, there are some questions about how some of your design, VJ and Nat, and even Friday, the rule system, right? What did you consider before cementing ideas, right? How does that process? What does that process look like to be? And obviously, nothing's cemented. We're early, right? There's always change happening, but how do you go about it? What does it look like to define, new rules or systems to put in place for this?
So I am pretty blessed on the team, being that most of the time, my job is just, I show up and be like, and I ask someone else, hey, can you make this like this? I'm like the ideas guy. I'm the annoying ideas guy on the team some of the time. And I'm just like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if, this happened? Oh, that'd be so dope. Okay, let me know how it goes. And then I just leave. That's most of my role.
It's not untrue.
It's so accurate.
Hey, I try to help, but sometimes, there are people that are better at it than me, which is why, like, for instance, like, I do narrative and I have mechanical people. You know what I mean? So I do a little bit of mechanics, but a lot of the time, especially working with both Nat and VJ who are here, I watch what they're doing, I see where their idea is going, and then I make a little comment and be like, wouldn't it be cool if ... And then usually I get a response, and I don't know if this is like them just trying to make me feel good. I normally get a response like, hey, that sounds like a good idea. I guess I got to temper that feeling.
Nat, you want to start it off?
So I was just saying, like, because the original question was like, what kind of rule stuff do you consider at first? And I think one of the foundational ideas I try to bring forward into anything when I'm creating for a system that's already present. And no matter where we were in Vineyard's history, we were creating for some sort of system that already existed. It's just which one changed, right? And one of the things I start with is this concept of minimal addition. You want to see the minimum new, like, full-fledged ideas you can put into the system to still acquire your idea. It's why I almost always ask if a class could be a subclass instead. What's the minimum we can add to it? You don't want to add an entire extra tower when you just need to build some scaffolding.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. It's a great design, like, theory,
Yeah, and it carries through for whatever design we're working on. So at one point, if it's okay if I pull back the curtain slightly, we were considering making Vineyard as using the Resistance Toolkit based on the Spire RPG. And I, at one point, went through the entire thing and went, okay, what would we have to make? What do we not have to make? And concepted out, the theory of hundreds of pages, not hundreds, like 100 pages, and just to see what it looked like and like how little we could get away with and what the different pathways, like if we do X and Y, that'll be 40 pages. But if we want to circumvent this part of the rules and build our own, that's going to add another 20. Is that worth it? So that cost-benefit analysis is a really important component.
This is why I brought on Nat onto the team, because they're thinking about it.
Yes, I love that. What about you? What about you, VJ, when it comes to kind of working on these mechanics?
Well, I'm in the same boat, but I think I start my process off differently. I actually usually what'll happen is I'll start like plotting out all of the, like, if I don't already know that, oh, there's a mechanic that, or there's a monster that does it like this, so I can just pull an example from that. If I think I have like a wealth of knowledge on that. If I don't already know what it is, I'll just start like building out what I think the mechanic should look like the bare bones of it. And then when I'm in a place where I'm like, okay, I could pass this draft off to Friday and get feedback on it, I then go searching in like a bunch of different places to be like, okay, has anyone else done this? Am I missing something from the 5e stuff? Any of my like contemporaries done it, that kind of thing. So it's definitely, and I like doing it that way because it also is it's good to like refine your abilities. It's good to refine your knowledge around like thinking back and like, okay, the Tarrasque does this and it could mirror this. So I can just take that like that. Like it's good to hone that, but it's also really great to like work out your mind in other creative ways by just coming up with brand new things, even if they're not going to like get in, like they're not going to get past the cutting board, like you'll have to throw them out, but it's still like what I like to think is what makes me the kind of designer that I am. So it's very much a like, okay, I know this already exists here. I'm not sure about this. Let's build it out in a rough draft, and then let's go do some more research to see if I just need to use it for somewhere else.
It's funny. I got really lucky when I got to kind of pick what I wanted to write, because part of what I got to choose was the new stuff. And Friday and I kind of talked about that, right? Like, I got a little bit of, this is something we want, right? Like we wanted this system, this new kind of, really it's like upping the stakes for the players, right? Because this is not like every other place, the Vineyard. It's not, it doesn't even function the same. And so why would your existence here be that? And so when I got to write this, the section on the guts and really what the guts are, and then I got to write a system, which was kind of cool. And I actually too work a little bit like Nat, right? I'm like, how can I do this based on what is already there in a way that is either completely system agnostic, so you can slap this on anything you want, and it works. Not really, right? Sometimes we think compatibility means 1-to-1, and I'll talk a little bit about this when we get to the Project Black Flag questions, which I promise everybody I will do my best to answer. But compatibility doesn't always mean 1-to-1. Compatibility more often than not means parallel. Means it can work in the same path as it, but it can also, veer off and be its own thing. It's standalone. And so when I developed the waste sickness and the system in which really is its own currency of the game, its own commentary, this mechanic is on what are you willing to give up? Because the guts will take everything from you. So I wanted the system where it wasn't just the players, but also the GM, right? The game master gets an opportunity to also have their own in-game currency that they get to spend to make the stakes of the story higher. And then those things between the two, the players and the GM, can then be traded in certain ways. So you can take things from the GM's pool of this corruption currency, this, sickness, and players can take it on in these amazing ways that aren't really about affecting your stats in whatever system you're playing on. It's not about your dexterity getting less or your body crumbling away. It's more about your moment. You can actually, as a player, take on a moment in the game where you say, yes, I will take that sickness on if I get to solve this problem in a narrative way. And then that sickness just becomes part of your existence. It doesn't change your stats necessarily. It's a cosmetic issue in that case, right? And how you solve it. Maybe you don't solve it. Maybe you keep it. But there's only so much of that rot that you can take in before you're not really yourself anymore. And so, again, it is an optional mechanic to add to the game, but it really provides these wonderful back and forth stakes. And so when I came into this, I said, I want to do this way, but I need to do it simply. I have to slice off all the extra and get to the core of what I'm trying to do here, which is really just like having a token at the table where the GM has it, and then it goes back to the player. The player can write back and forth, and it just becomes its own trade. So it's simple, and it doesn't have to have a system, but if it does, it can be very impactful by giving you extra rolls or these kinds of things. So we have a few other questions we've not quite asked yet, and I think it's really important here, actually, Friday, for you to maybe define for us what the structure of the Vineyard looks like, because this question is, I think, actually very important. So can players take over the organization via climbing ranks or betraying lower-ranking members of the Vineyard? So explain to everybody why it might be that could be possible, and then if it is or not.
Yes, absolutely, it is possible. And there are 3 major narrative pathways and mechanical pathways that we will be supporting for every character. And that is 1, the typical, and I'm just going to use this framework because everyone's familiar with it, because all of us are familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, or most of us. There's the lawful evil route, which is you're going to join the Vineyard and you're going to gain power through the Vineyard. And that would be considered a lawful evil route. And then we have a system that supports if you wish to go the chaotic route, and that would be moving down the path of really embracing the chaos of the guts and wasting sickness and utilizing those things as weapons to be an agent of chaos. And then there is the route that you can take narratively to defend your community and remain human, essentially, while the other 2 routes are not human. But being human would be more of like a neutral route between the 3 of them, whereas the Vineyard route or the Chaos route are generally more bent on destruction. based on the narrative that we have presented. Not that chaos always has to be destructive, but in the way that we've constructed the wasting sickness and the guts themselves, that is how they function. As far as the way that you might climb the ranks in the Vineyard, everything is done through contracts. And I believe Kimchi will be by later to join us.
Oh, nice.
I would love for him to talk about this, but he's putting his kids down right now. Great father by all accounts, I believe. But the way that you deal with the Vineyard is through contracts, and everything costs something. So if you are seeking something from the Vineyard, you're seeking some money, you're seeking some power, you're seeking a means to an end. It's going to cost you something in the form of a contract, and you're going to owe the Vineyard something. And most of that owing of the Vineyard, or that debt that you have to the Vineyard, is going to be an action, meaning that you have to do something for them. And that's most of what they want. They want you to work for them. Everything that the Vineyard has in its goal set and its like model for the future is absorbing as much power as possible, absorbing secrets, absorbing people. Instead of killing people, the Vineyard is looking at having more people work for them. And if you haven't fulfilled your debt, you will continue working for them after you've died.
So then that begs the question, a few other things that have come through, such as, what's your favorite part of character creation in this regard for the Vineyard system? Do we have special character creation options?
I think at this point, we have developed one unique type of character, and it falls within the lineage sort of area. We are looking at creating Whisperborn, which are, at this point, and this is something that Nat, you are the primary designer on, so you can speak more to this if you'd like. You feel comfortable talking about this?
Yeah, sure. So this one was done. This is original narrative design from Kiana Shaw, and then I walked in, read everything about her narrative notes, and synthesized it into some mechanics. And these are individuals that are born from a secret.
Oh, that's so cool.
Like, quite literally, there is a secret that is given to them that nobody else gets to know. If anyone else ever does learn it, besides their like patron god, they die. They unravel and die. So remember what I said about minimum design edition? Well, I did have to write a mechanic for that. Like, if the Whisperborn's secret gets out there, they die, and they can't get resurrected unless a new secret is offered up. And that new secret's offered up is then erased from the mind of the person who gave it to them. And then this works into this cyclical circle with like, okay, well, the Whisperborn, they have this ability to lift a secret from other people's minds, a confessional, an ablative confessional. And now we're starting to get a cycle. We're starting to get a vehicle that a player can ride into a story.
Yeah, I love
have a good time. And then, there's some mechanics alongside that, but they get some other juice.
Now, speaking of mechanics, some folks want to know how the magic system works.
So for the magic system, we aren't departing too much from what's going to be presented in Project Black Flag. So I think that is more of a Project Black Flag question. But for us, the magic that is unique to our system is going to be involved with the secrets themselves. So when you give up a secret to the Confessor or to one of the clerics of the Wandering Mother, you are giving up a secret. Like, as soon as you speak it, it leaves your mouth, it becomes physical, and then the Whisperborn or the Confessor will take it from you in a script of paper. And then that becomes offerings for the Wandering Mother and ultimately for Ashlyn Rowena, the head of the Vineyard. That is what sort of defines like the magical system, because these secrets, again, can be used as like components. They can be used as conduits. There's a lot of different ways that they can be used, and we're trying to mechanize these ideas narratively now. Especially, we're going to have to alter a lot of the stuff that we're doing to mirror and support and bring more to the table for the Black Flag system that we're going to be using. But ultimately, the narrative is really focused around secrets, as far as magic or anything else that is unique to this
really
game.
Love that, actually. It's so perfect for the setting, but also really subtle in certain ways. And I love it. I just love that so much. Let's see. Well, I guess I can say Project Black Flag is going to really be two parts, and I think that's important for everybody to understand, right? Project Black Flag is a project code name for a larger series of ongoing efforts by Kobold Press, one of which is a new core mechanic system that will be under an open license in which Vineyard will be using to develop, and those mechanics are available in its entirety. So it is 5e parallel. You can take a 5e character and run it in Project Black Flag. But it will also have a very unique Kobold taste. So if you like Kobold Press and the way that we do certain things, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised with some of the things we're working in, such as the heritage system, right? Lineage and heritage are going to be a big part of character creation. But in terms of magic, what we have said, and I can say, is that our current Deep Magic 2, which is, almost done on Kickstarter here, is going to be forward compatible with Project Black Flag. So much of the magic system that you know and love will be in place, with some alterations dependent upon other mechanics, right? Because that's just how the magic system works. So it's not going to be too far from what you know. Hopefully it'll actually be better and simpler and provide some really cool additional options for both players and GMs in encounters and combat as well. Not all of that has been released necessarily in what those things look like. We are, to answer the playtest question, rolling those out in playtest packets once a month from now until the Kickstarter. We have not announced a Kickstarter date, so I know I cannot tell you when that is. And each packet that drops will be a piece of the puzzle, I guess you could say, of Project Black Flag and what that book looks like. So the first playtest packet has been announced to release in February. No, I cannot give you a date. And so just keep your eyes out. And that information has NDA been passed off to our Vineyard friends, at least in what we have now available to them. And we will keep our Vineyard friends up to date, and they will definitely be getting earlier previews than all of you. So I'm sorry, they're special and we love them, and they need it to finish this awesome book called The Vineyard Project. So there you go. There you have it. That I think I can answer. This is actually important because we're now partnered with Project Black Flag. Will we need to go back and rewrite and align new things? I kind of answered from my side, but anybody else can chip in on that.
Yeah, there's a good chunk. Like there's some things that were done. Like when I said the Whisperbone was done, that's what I meant. It was done. It's not anymore because
I'm sorry. I feel guilty.
Once you get a clear picture. No, you're fine. You're fine. It's just, we got to make sure it vibes with the good stuff. And as someone who's seen some of the playtest stuff, it's exciting stuff. And I want to build stuff that works.
Cool. Okay, that makes me happy to hear.
Yeah. I would like to talk about some of our mechanics that me and VJ have worked out for some of these lieutenants and also Ashlyn Ravenna themselves. And this is something that we're talking about in 5e terms and just understanding that Kobold Press has said for Project Black Flag. Project Black Flag will be sort of adjacent of 5e, so it'll be similar to what we're talking about, but there will be some changes being made.
Jesus, I was talking and realized.
Yeah, there you are.
So there were so two of the big guys that I've been working on is, of course, our main big bad, Ashlyn, and of course the Confessor, who is, I like to describe as just straight Catholic guilt and religious trauma, but like it's pretty close. Like there's some Christian, there's some like Baptist religious trauma in there as well for my own personal brand.
Yeah, as soon as I saw that draft from Kiana, I messaged Kiana and I was like, "You have a lot of religious trauma, don't you?" And she was like, "Actually, no. I just like hyper focused on it when I was in college and learned a lot about it." So I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, this is really great. This feels." Yeah, this feels like it comes from a place of trauma, therefore making it very good art. So I like this, but go ahead, VJ.
Yeah. So, okay, wait. How much of the vibe can I say about the two characters? Like,
oh yeah, you can. Yeah, let's talk about it. That's
fine.
With everything.
Yeah. Sweet. Okay. So, just to start off with the Confessor, because I worked on them more recently. There were one of the newer. I say newer, it definitely pulled on different design elements from different abilities, but it's definitely like something on its own that we had. And hold on, I'm pulling it up because I really just wanted to like actually point it out. Like Friday and I were talking about like this kind of confession box that like a character might get stuck in if depending on like failing their save and having to like speak out some type of like thing and actually repent for it. And maybe it doesn't have like a mechanical consequence besides like letting them out of this confession box, but it does have like role-playing implications. And I think we really carried that across both of these stat blocks of like, okay, we're going to have all this really cool like stuff that happens to them, that happens to the people that they are actually attacking or like interacting with, because Azling doesn't really actually attack anybody if they can help it, but it'll also have like potentially some serious role playing and social repercussions as well. And I don't think enough monster design does that, like mixes in that serious role play repercussions along with the mechanics. But one second, I have this stat block up so I can tell you the
give us spill the beans, give us the deets.
Okay.
Mixing those two can be hard though, like because oftentimes you want to be, there's a fine line to walk. Like I know your pain. Sorry, I'm just trying to fill some space for you while you're pulling stuff up. Go ahead.
No worries. Thank you. So we specifically have this recharge ability called Repent. And so the Confessor points an accusatory finger at a creature and screams at it to repent. You've got a pretty high DC to hit 24, which, I mean, by the time you're facing these lieutenants, you should be able to feasibly hit a 24. You do take like a bunch of psychic damage, regardless if you pass or fail. But at the end of that next turn, there's very much like you're forced to verbally repent for some misdeed. And that can mean like a lot of things. Like there's no clear, like, well, we're going to give guidance to the DMs of what like verbally repenting could look like for a misdeed. So like they can, one, be upfront with the players, like, hey, start thinking about some things you might have done in your past. And also just letting them know like this is going to be a heavy part of this campaign so that people are safe and comfortable, consent in gaming and whatnot. But it's definitely, in the notes we make, it's definitely going to be a vehicle to like have them, if the player can't pick, or have them roll on a table or something for like the nature of a misdeed they did, and potentially have it like tied to something that happened in another character's backstory or something like that, that will maybe force something out into the open, which will then just cause more conflict. And then if you survive your interaction with the Confessor and you move on to like, the actual big boss, that can have like more repercussions there and more threads to pull on to maybe make a deal that you previously might not have considered had the party not started to kind of fracture because of what happened there.
If I can point out, we do plan, and I have, for every single adventure that we're writing to be a part of the book, there are secrets that are being used for backgrounds, backstories, and mechanical uses within the overall plot structure in order to get people to sort of buy into what this sort of story is. We're providing a ton of secrets to either give out to your players, for players to pick. I would caution you against showing them the entire chart at once, for instance. But yeah, you're going to have the tools to be able to navigate this sort of storytelling if you choose to do that.
Are we going to get any teasers to go along with some of the playtest material coming out with Project Black Flag? And I know, you've got some things coming down the pipeline, like, I don't know, a Kickstarter Friday. So can we expect some teasers of some stuff?
Yeah, I am very interested in bringing forward the adventure that we're writing to highlight the Confessor. And the Confessor, if you need your Dommy Mommy fix, if you're listening to this podcast, it's the winged individual that you saw in when you clicked on this podcast. That is the Confessor, as depicted by Yorsi Hernandez, designed by Kiana Shaw, and the mechanics developed by mostly VJ, and then me just in the back, like, hey, what if we did? So, that's my official job title. But for the package that we want to release, I think we are going to wait a little, maybe till like March or April. Maybe we'll put it in the Kickstarter launch to have this one-shot adventure to sort of sample. I really want to release it with our Kickstarter, but it's really going to come between, it's really going to be determined by whether or not Kobold Press will be able to share with us enough about Black Flag at that point to be able to sort of...
Right.
To be able to sort of launch it. Okay. But yeah. We'll see.
All right. Well then, that tells you a little bit. Let's see. I want to miss anybody's questions. Now, I have a question. How much are we revealing here Friday? Like, how many beans can we spill?
As far as I'm concerned, like, the only reason we had adhered to any NDA is because
okay, so Black Flag's gonna be like, we'll put that off the table, but we can spill all kinds of beans. And speaking of, we have somebody that has just joined us.
Yeah, so Good
Hi.
evening. Good evening. Kimchi, if you could introduce yourself for the recorded podcast.
Hello, I am Legal Kimchi. I run a YouTube channel where I do video essays, primarily about TTRPGs and geek-related subjects, although I venture out occasionally. And I am a writer on The Vineyard.
Wonderful. Kimchi, I wanted to pose this question to you because we were just talking about some of the other lieutenants and some of the other monster design that we have for this game. And I wanted to talk to you about how contracts work, how they're conceived, the concept of them, how they will narratively work, and also a little bit about your NPC, if you could.
Ooh, now are we asking like contracts in general? Because I can go into a little bit about. For those who may not know, I am an actual contracts attorney. So this is that's my day job. So my understanding of contracts comes from both the professional and narrative.
Let's dive into it and how they work for the Vineyard, and like what is the goal of an organization like the Vineyard when they're doling out these contracts?
Well, the goal of an organization like the Vineyard is kind of like a real corporation, but less evil. It's a circumstance where the contract that is engaged in is sort of a monkey's paw. I don't know if that's kind of be careful what you wish for type thing, where on paper it will provide you with what you need, but in reality, do you fully understand the price? Do you fully understand the consideration, to use the legal terminology? When attorneys are talking about contracts, and this is both in real world negotiation and in the Vineyard, what you're trying to do is to get the best deal for your side. And in the business world, we always have attorneys representing both sides. In fact, it is unethical in the United States to have a contract negotiation where only one side has an attorney at the negotiation. If I walk into a negotiation and the other side has their attorney and we don't have, or well, not using me as an example, but if like my company were to get into a negotiation, the other side brought their attorney and our side didn't, that attorney would have to leave the phone call because it's considered an unfair negotiation and unethical for them to continue. I've actually had that circumstance happen where people have come into a meeting and it's like, oh, you don't have your attorney. Well, we got to end the meeting. Good night. So the reason for that is because it is so easy to get caught up the little details, because sometimes there are catches. There are things that have meaning that aren't readily apparent. So it's something where with the Vineyard, well, they have the Solicitor General and you do not. You have to be cautious about the contracts that you're entering into because you may be giving away a little bit more than you imagined.
I love that. And I would say that one of the probably most insidious things about it is that you are bargaining with your humanity in a lot of these contract deals. And one of the things I did want to point out for our listeners and people that are considering buying the Vineyard when we launch on Kickstarter, pre-ordering or whatever, is that we're going to have these examples for you, these boilerplate contracts. We're going to have a section of the book dedicated to this is how you would design a contract if you want to do something outside of the standard boilerplate. And then we're also going to have some examples within the adventures of contracts, not only happening for your characters if you want it to be, or for just being peripherally involved in a contract in some way, because so much of it is involved with the have and the have-nots and being able to fulfill your end of the bargain for the Vineyard.
And it's a little bit of a delicate balance, if I may, because to me, as a dungeon master or as a game master, there is a sort of 3 levels that a contract needs to work on in a game. The first level is what it seems like in the beginning, where we want this, you have this, let's make a deal. The second level is sort of the trap that the Vineyard is trying to pull on you, the thing that you don't realize that they're going to get. And then the third level, the way the players get out of it, if they figure out that loophole, because you don't want to make something ironclad. Because nothing is in reality, right? That's not how actual contracts work. There's always a way to weasel out of it, which is, if you ever read a contract in the real world, you wonder, it's like, why do they have like 8 different words right in order that mean basically the same thing? Because somebody tried to weasel out of it using one of those 8 words. And so the reality of it is you as a game master, need to balance the gotcha moment with the players have won moment, because otherwise they don't want to engage. Why would they want to play this game? You know?
Right.
So I don't think anyone on this call is aware of this, but all of my campaigns I run always end up with an arc that's a legal drama. I don't know. I just can't help myself. We end up with some crappy, stick-a-ball version of a court case to handle, something like that. And I've realized two things. First of all, I should never invite Kimchi to one of my campaigns. He'll be eviscerated. Secondly, I have a subclass I need to pitch to Friday for this.
Look at that!
Product.
Exciting. Also,
that was a joke, by the way, Kimchi. If you ever want to play with me, absolutely down. You're a joy.
I'll take you up on that. I think the other question Friday was about the NPC.
Yeah, let's talk about the Solicitor General. How did you conceive them, and how do you think mechanically you're bringing something very unique and fun and rage-inducing to the table?
Well, to me, the Solicitor General is, in a way, a living embodiment of the law. And how I come from an old traditional fantasy background where, law and chaos, the constant struggle between those two, that Michael Moorcock, was it Piers Anthony, old school fantasy trope. And I really enjoy that, where it's not like evil or good, it's law and chaos, and both law and chaos can be good or evil. And so the Solicitor General to me is sort of the embodiment of the law taken to an extreme to destroy people. Like law as a manipulation, like everything you think of negatively when you think of lawyers, right? I don't know what that says about me and possible self-hatred or whatever, but... But
at least you're being paid to go through this therapy with us as a writer, right?
I wanted to be an actor. So the Solicitor General is like outside of what we perceive of even as a person, because they're kind of like the Borg. They're trying to strive a pinnacle of pure law, removes other aspects of who they may have used to be at some point. And so I wanted to take that to an extreme, to the point where they're like, they look like they don't hold that sort of form, because that's irrelevant. The law is what is relevant. And so how much can I get into with the solicitor? Do I spill the beans on this?
Yeah, go ahead. You can talk about the unique mechanics around the Solicitor General. Yeah, that's fine.
So the one mechanic that I thought of for this one that I got giddy about, and kind of everything else kind of comes from it, is the Solicitor General's ability to use their word as law. The mechanic here is that during an encounter, if you're trying to actually fight the Solicitor General, which I do not recommend, then they can make a proclamation of law, a simple statement that is incontrovertible, and the rest of the encounter has to factor that in. So if the Solicitor General sees a bunch of fighters come up, or warriors, and they all draw their swords, then the Solicitor General can state, as a word of law, metals cannot touch me. Now all of your swords are useless. So how do you fight when your swords are useless? Well, now the party has to think of, how can I break this word of law through a technicality? Because technicalities are how you break the law. Finding little loopholes, finding little ways to get around the statement which is true, and thus subvert the intent of it.
Oh, I love that.
So,
and you know what? Think about it. How many times have your players actually done that at the table? Like the strategies my players will come up with to like get around stuff. And I love that there's actually maybe a mechanic and a figure that actually puts into like physicality that idea that my word is law. That's just so cool.
Exactly, because like any group has those players who just like, well, technically this should still work. This is an encounter where where the whole point is the game master can be like, well, technically, yeah, that would kind of work.
Yeah,
there we go.
And in this example that Kimchi just gave, then the solution, the technical solution, would be if you wrap up your swords, cloth or whatever, and then you just bludgeon the Solicitor General, then that's a technical way around that, because the metal is not touching the Solicitor General.
It's actually kind of wonderful, because it like what we are building together actually basically says that our players are really smart. So let's give them a really smart, tricky space to like exist in for their characters. And I just love that. I love allowing my players to stretch what they know and love, you know? Yeah, for sure. Friday, are there other lieutenants we want to spoil? Do you want me to spoil mine?
Yeah, sure. We can talk about the surgeon
or the arms dealer, whichever we
land on. Yeah.
So I mentioned that my lieutenant was already like the character I was creating was tied to the dark market. I love this idea that maybe there was a lieutenant who is, surprise, using technicalities and the system as it is to benefit in multiple ways. And I've always been really, I don't know why, drawn to the kind of evil doctor type. So like I loved what was it? Dr. Blight from Captain Planet. I was always really drawn to, I loved Captain Poison? What is her name? Dr. Poison from Wonder Woman. These kind of doctor builds that are super corrupt. Like it's like the doctor you don't want to go to. And that's literally how I pitched this to Friday. I was like, I want the doctor that like you don't want to go to, but you don't have a choice. It's like a military doctor. Right. So in its own right. And so I wanted this character, but this character is playing Vineyard's system in such a way that they are living two lives. They are actually playing this surgeon that is really one of the major sources for being able to remove the waste sickness. And in doing so, in that trade of maybe it's content warning, a limb that needs to be removed. Maybe it is the fact that an eye has rotted away and you need a replacement. The surgeon can fix you up with that, but you don't get to keep whatever they take. That is the trade. This infected piece of you is now theirs to own, and what they do with it is resell it on the dark market as weaponry. So there's a possibility you could make a trade, cure your sickness, get a cool, who knows, a mechanical arm or a new piece for yourself that's really cool, and then you end up in the dark market and a piece of you is for sale. Your arm has been turned into a new gun that uses the darkness of the rot and the waste sickness, as Friday said, as these weapons that create chaos in the system. It breaks it. And so because of the way the dark market functions, nobody uses their real name, and so neither does the surgeon. Why would they? This is their secret side business. And right now we're calling them the arms dealer because they're basically selling weaponry. Trademark pending. So there's a lot to that character. And there will be some really cool mechanics for ways that players can seek out the surgeon and make trade happen. Like I said, I'm working a lot with a currency system and some fun things there of like how does trade work when your gold has no value.
Wonderful. I am super excited about that NPC and the rest of the NPCs mentioned, of course. My near and dear to my heart, my baby, VJ, before we move on to the next question. Let's talk about, I'm not calling you baby VJ, I'm talking about Ashlyn Ravenna. I mean, we could talk about it, off the stage. But so Ashlyn Ravenna, let's talk about what you and I have worked out for Ashlyn.
Okay, I want to say that what I'm about to say is not just because I am the designer for Ashlyn, but I genuinely mean it. I don't think I've seen, and this could also just be me like not reading all of the monster manuals that I own as well. Like there's a bunch, any or barely any, if at all, stat blocks that are really more dedicated to like not doing violence towards anybody and more so trying to turn whatever encounter it is into a negotiation of sorts, which is very much the kind of, not even the kind of, very much the vibe for when you actually go in and at any point meet Ashlyn, either in their actual lair or Friday, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like it's unlikely that you meet Ashlyn outside of their literal base, but I don't know
that
what
is true.
They're gonna do. Could be like an actual Curse of Strahd thing where Strahd pops up and starts taunting people and you can't really do anything about it. But either way, I feel like at every point when we were working on what to do with Ashlyn as far as like abilities went, it was very much a like, hey, Ashlyn would much rather de-escalate a situation and make it a conversation of like, hey, come work for me, or make a deal with me, do this, do that. And while there still are obviously like offensive things in here. So like, for example, there is like a binding strike that does like, is Ashlyn doing actual damage, but we more than not have other things like spell reflection, which if Ashlyn passes a saving throw or spell attack misses them, they can choose to target other creatures, including the spellcaster with said spells. And it just really, one, I think it allows a lot of like battlefield control, really focusing on more of a defensive aspect and de-escalation. And two, I don't think there's enough room in like big boss battles for conversations to happen, and for good reason, right? Like, sure, maybe you let the BBEG do the monologue, or maybe you don't let your DM do that and you just attack them right away. But for the most part, there's very little like back and forth social interaction happening during that. And Ashlyn is definitely built for that to actually be something that happens, and for combat to like maybe even take a lull in between, like so maybe you get into this combat and you're fighting for a couple rounds, and then it's like, let's actually take a breather and stop. And then maybe for some reason the combat picks up. Like, it makes sense encounter-wise for that to happen.
Yeah, the narrative that I've written for Ashlyn is, and just to quote some of it, which will probably get edited and like refined, but Ashlyn Ravenna is not interested in killing the party of player characters, but does not interfere if they're lieutenants. Their majesty is ambivalent to the life or death of any mortal. They are above interacting directly with the party and prefer to utilize lieutenants to make statements on their behalf. Rarely are they seen. Therefore, the focus of role-playing Ashlyn is not on displaying them directly, but on displaying their influence. And one of the major things that happens for this combat, if you end up like at the end game for the Vineyard and you are confronting Ashlyn, one of the great things about it is that like if you confront Ashlyn too early, they're not going to kill you. They have other things that they'd like to do. They have 4 outcomes that they are looking for in combat, and that may expand. We may make it more robust, but as of right now, Ashlyn is looking for total party assimilation into the Vineyard, meaning that everyone signs a contract and joins the Vineyard, or they're looking for the party to kill itself by converting some of them in the middle of combat, or it's looking at killing only some of them and absorbing the rest into the Vineyard. Or the final option, if they can't negotiate, they can't convince that they may want to work for the Vineyard, or it's their only option, they might be able to convince people that there's a bigger threat than the Vineyard, and that destroying the Vineyard looses the valve on what they're holding back, which in this case is unspeakable horrors that the Vineyard sort of keeps bottled up. And it's one of the reasons that the Vineyard is in power, because it has used that sort of as a negotiation tactic with the city in order to gain power as an organization, because they are the lesser of the evils presented. And we are going to include really big conversation trees, and that's the easiest way for me to explain it, but inspirational like dialogue that you can use for Ashlyn sort of negotiating with the party at every step. I think that's a big part of the design that we're working into this, because it is such an unusual combat encounter, or such an unusual encounter altogether, that I think providing GMs with more tools to be able to actually flesh that out and get the ball rolling and stuff like that is very important. Sometimes GMs just need 1 or 2 things on the page in order to get going, but if someone needs the whole script, we'll provide the whole script for what Ashlyn is going to say to people to get them to stop attacking.
I feel like we've answered pretty much all of the questions that have been put forward thus far in our question chat, at least to some degree, and in a range in which we can actually do with honesty. So I always like to ask this question at the end of any kind of interview, which is, what is a nugget of you that you have put into this? Like, what is a little Easter egg that we could give people that's like your inspiration, your thing, something you've pulled from your life that might just plop right in this? I know Kimchi kind of mentioned something already, but it could be bizarre and off the wall. I was about to say, here, you know what? I'll break that egg open, that Easter egg open. The black market is actually based on Shakedown Street. For all of you Deadheads out there, Grateful Dead fans, Shakedown Street is the pop-up market that happens before all of the concerts, where all the Deadheads sell gear. And most of the time it can be t-shirts, it can be food, it's a pop-up market that happens in the parking lot. And it's known as Shakedown Street because it said that you can shake out anything you need on Shakedown Street. And most of the time deals on Shakedown Street, as you can imagine, when you have a lot of Deadheads and hippies around, are not always done in cash. And so being a deadhead myself, the black market is my inspiration for Shakedown Street, from Shakedown Street.
I think one of the major things that I wanted front and center when I was initially developing this character, who sort of developed over time as my personal identity evolved. Ashlyn Ravenna is a non-binary character who can change their gender at will to sort of reflect what they believe that someone would desire seeing in order to help negotiations move along a bit smoother. So for Ashlyn, we have provided like a masculine and a feminine form that I think we presented in some places. Most people have just seen the feminine form. For Ashlyn, we have a masculine form as well, done by Yorsi. But I think for the most part, the interesting thing about Ashlyn, when I was first developing them, was I was kind of looking into the general lore of like succubus, incubus, and to realize that they are canon according to the Bible. If you want to use that as your first lore book, the Bible kind of indicates that they are non-binary things, and that is how I've just placed them into the Vineyard. And how Ashlyn came up was being this succubus / incubus had gathered people's secrets over time, and then after however many years, according to the lore and the mythos that we'll put in the book, they sort of manifested their own destiny as the new undead god of secrets, and that is where they're moving towards within the plot of the Vineyard RPG, is they are attempting to ascend once more into godhood, put on that mantle. Yeah, it started with queerness.
Anybody else have like little bits of inspiration that are unique or maybe not just blatant?
So I have always had a little special love of that investigative journalist style end of the spectrum. I think movies like Spotlight, people who are trying to reveal the darkness amongst all that, and this dichotomy between how we often perceive of mass media these days versus that investigative trying to get something done more, something good done, and how you can use stories and language to actually present the same information in such different ways. And there is a beauty in the truth of what you can, with the ink that goes to the page. And there is a beauty in the thoroughness to which you can bend it around a tree branch and have it lie. A beauty, I would say. And that comes down into some of the creatures and ideas I had, because if we think of the Vineyard as partially a publishing house, technically speaking, I thought that idea fit quite nicely, and I pitched a couple ideas connected to that at various stages. I'm sure it'll come through somewhere in the final design.
I will point out that Sebastian Yue, one of our writers, did develop a printing press that is sort of controlled by the Vineyard to push out propaganda and things of that nature, and to control the rumors within the city.
Exactly.
And the story. So that does exist as part of like the Vineyard storyline if you choose to utilize Verity Fiducia, the editor-in-chief of the Grapevine.
I love that. That's very cool. Anybody else?
Mm-hmm. Calling it the Grapevine is very bold.
Any other thoughts, Easter eggs, fun tidbits we should let people know about, inspirations and such?
Yeah. So okay, so we haven't fully fleshed this out. It's just kind of in its outline form right now. So there is an adventure that comes with the Confessor, obviously, like back at her lair and whatnot, with various like guardians from.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about it.
There's this one place that's going to be like the Lounge of Lust, and we were kind of basing off of like wrath, lust, greed. I think the next one was sloth. Like, no, wait, it was lust, wrath, greed, and treachery. That's and right. Like, yeah, while we haven't fleshed it out, we like have had like bullet points, and I know when we like the parts that we have actually fleshed out. So like, I'm a queer guy. I didn't learn that until like high school, and then my parents was pretty sheltered kid in a lot of places, and then got to college and kind of went a little buck wild around like that queerness and just being the kind of lustful guy that I couldn't really be around my parents and in high school. And so I just when you're interacting with the pleasure den, just know that it comes from like a place of like, oh, hey, I had this whole like queer wild experience for like a year and a half before like I collected myself.
Love that so much.
The Tower of Atonement adventure. Oh, it's so fun. I'm super excited for people to play the adventure. That'll probably be our preview adventure that we drop. Whenever we do drop a preview adventure, it'll be the Tower of Atonement, which is the not necessarily the confrontation with the Confessor, because you don't necessarily want to fight the Confessor, but you are protected. You're on a protection mission, or for other reasons, you might have other motivations for being there, but you are escorting someone who was called to confess to Astilius. Go ahead, Kimchi.
Well, two things that I wanted to point out. Number one, for anyone out there who might think that having a printing press, medieval fantasy game, is anachronistic, metal movable type printing presses like the one that Gutenberg invented existed in Korea over 200 years prior to Gutenberg's invention of that printing press. So we're talking about the 13th century, like 1232. Wow. They have printed books from movable metal type. So 100% printing presses existed during that time frame. Number one. Just want to clear the air. History is something that I am extraordinarily passionate about, and it always bothers me when people say that's anachronistic. No, it's not. Grenades existed during that time. Don't get me started.
This has been Kimchi from PBS.
If you want to have a video about the history of leather armor and its uses in the Middle Ages, I have a video on that on my YouTube channel. Anyway, the second thing is, like, we've all talked about this a little bit, and Friday, you mentioned it previously, the therapy session that is creating for TTRPGs. It is 100% true with the Solicitor General. A lot of it is autobiographical, with the Solicitor General being a solicitor who used to work on cases and then fell on corrupt judges and magistrates, jaded with the disregard of the actual law that happens when you are practicing the law. That really did happen to me. I used to do trial work, and I was in these court cases where if we were to just go about looking at the letter of the law, easy slam dunk. And then I'd come away with like, how did that happen? What just happened here? Clear violations. And the more you read about the American legal system and how it operates in history, the more you understand that a Supreme Court case is not as final as you might think it is. A legal decision or a way that the law is supposed to go is not exactly what you think it is. And the anger that can sometimes build when you experience that firsthand is sort of the inspiration for the Solicitor General, sort of an embodiment of my own frustrations, the way the American legal system works. So it's interesting that you talk about that, like, welcome to the therapy session. 100%. It's a therapy session. It was kind of exercising the demons. I'm from Texas. Sorry. And it's been just a joy to put it down.
I have to agree. Yeah, that's actually a really great way to put it. We've all talked about, like, Confessor clearly has, some of our religious trauma in it, and my personal body shaming issues of the past have come out in this doctor character who augments their body. Like, there's each pieces of us, and I think that's one of the things that Friday has done great is, like, bring a team of people together that are not only awesome at what they do, but are willing to put this level of, like, love and effort into something that's going to make it awesome. There's, like, a little piece of each of us in it.
Yeah. And just as I suppose a final note, I appreciate anyone listening to this to find out more about the Vineyard RPG. If you end up buying the Vineyard RPG, know that we pay our contributors fair wages. I think that is incredibly important in an industry which often thrives on predatory practices against freelancers and does not pay them a living wage. But everything that we are trying to build with these products is a healthier community. People can talk about difficult subjects and role play through difficult subjects with consent and respect for one another.
One of the things that really drew me to this project was actually the level of care we were taking, even in some of the more difficult topics, right? And providing space for everybody in this book to be able to use it and play it and tell their story, which is kind of awesome and unique. Something that's and fair wages, right? That's also yay. We love that. Thank you, Friday, for inviting us.
it's a little astounding how like big of a deal that is in this industry.
Yep.
How hard it is to
Truly,
find,
like I said, I had just finished working on a project with a few companies, and when Friday made the pitch, I was like, "You're not like pulling my leg, right? Like for real?" I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Okay, I am on board." So if Friday's doing a very good job of helping us feed ourselves and our cats, and being an awesome like process as well. It's been really nice to work with everybody.
And occasionally repairing our refrigerators because
Yeah.
mine just went out. I just
Oh, I love it. Now, I think it's important to say, Friday, can you give us some information about maybe when this Kickstarter is available for people to back? Like, what can we expect from your timeline?
So right now we are scheduled for April 3rd, probably sometime in the morning Pacific. So by 10 a.m. Eastern, it'll be live April 3rd, Monday. And I believe we'll run it until the first Monday in May. And that'll give you 2 pay periods in case you missed the first one and you want to back us. The more you back us, honestly, the more stretch goals that we can unlock and the bigger we can make the book. Important to me that we put as much as possible into the book. We have more adventure. We have more tools for you to enjoy. And we are definitely looking at this as something that we want to make the best book possible for anyone just to read and then also play with. And we want to make everything actionable and like easy to use and like really create memorable experiences for everyone who picks this book up.
Well, we have come to the end of our questions, and I feel like that is a really beautiful way to wrap Friday. So take us away.
Yeah, thank you so much to everyone who is listening. And if you haven't already, please click the Backer Kit link or our Kickstarter link and put in your email. Take a look at our preview PDF at the very least. You'll get that if you sign up for our Backer Kit. And then you can just take a look at, the high level quality stuff that we're putting in here. And that's what we really expect to put into the rest of the book. And thank you so much for your time and everyone's energy.
Have a great night, everybody.